I remember that time with a kind of silent tenderness. The days still dawned quietly, and the breeze that touched the mountains carried the scent of innocence. Europe seemed to breathe calmly, as if the world had forgotten for a moment the taste of pain. From above, I saw Heinrich, a 23-year-old young man, marching among rows of golden wheat. His father worked the land with his own hands, and he dreamed of doing the same. But in every village, different voices whispered promises of greatness, and pride began to feel like a form of hope. Heinrich believed them. He was a good son, obedient, respectful, with his heart divided between work and duty. Once, while watching the sunset, he said to his mother, "Perhaps sacrifice is the price of peace." She only smiled, but inside she felt a strange chill, as if the clouds were already announcing something. To the east, in Poland, a young woman wrote on the blackboard of the village's small school. Anna liked to start her classes with a question: what makes a man good? The children answered with purity. Some said love, others said faith, and she smiled, believing that the future could be born from the right words. She lived with her mother and her brother Marek, who played the violin at dusk. The sound echoed across the fields, and I liked to listen to it. It was simple, sincere, human. I saw both worlds, Heinrich and Anna, separated only by borders that men themselves had created. The same sun warmed their skin, the same rain soaked their roofs, but the words they heard were different. In Germany, they spoke of glory and reparation. In Poland, they spoke of fear and resistance, and among these voices, silence began to change its tone. It was no longer the silence of peace, but that of waiting, a tense silence, the kind that precedes a storm. Heinrich trained with the army, convinced he was protecting his nation. Anna distributed books among families, trying to teach what little hope remained. I saw them from above, so small, so full of the desire to do right, yet walking in opposite directions. One night in August, the wind blew differently. The animals became restless, and the horizon seemed farther away. I felt the entire planet hold its breath. Anna closed the windows and embraced her brother. Heinrich polished his helmet and stared at the reflection of the sky in it, as if seeking answers. And I, who loved the silence of that world, realized it was about to disappear. The stars still shone, but there was a new restlessness in them, as if even the sky knew what was coming. And so, between the soft sound of the violin and the distant echo of boots, the first crack began to form in the heart of the earth. I saw everything, and there was nothing I could do but watch. The crack grew silently, like a dark root spreading beneath the soil. The words of men became orders, and prayers began to give way to speeches. From above, I saw the streets fill with flags, parades, and promises. Each symbol seemed to shine, but behind them was something cold, something I recognized from ancient times, the illusion of power. Heinrich wore the uniform for the first time in September. The fabric was rough, heavy. He looked at himself in the mirror, and no longer saw the boy from the fields. He saw a soldier, shaped by the fear of disappointing others. The commander spoke to him about honor and duty, but I saw in Heinrich's eyes the doubt that was slowly growing. At night, he wrote letters home, trying to convince himself that all of it was necessary. "If God wills it," he wrote at the end of each one, and I listened in silence. Meanwhile, Anna felt the winds changing. The children began to miss school. Some parents disappeared suddenly, called to join the country's defense. The village seemed to shrink a little with each dawn. She still taught, even when only 2 or 3 children showed up. She wrote simple words on the board: peace, home, courage, as one tries to keep a flame alive in a place without air. Her brother Marek continued to play the violin at night. The sound was sadder now, but still beautiful. It was the music that reminded me of what men could be when they forgot hate. From above, I saw the distance between the two worlds diminish. The borders were becoming fragile, not because of peace, but because of the approach of conflict. Trains began to cross Germany, carrying men, weapons, and twisted dreams. The wheat fields where Heinrich had worked were full of marks from metal wheels. He said goodbye to his mother on a grey morning. She gave him a white handkerchief and said, "Remember to return human." He did not answer. He simply lowered his head and I heard the sound of a tear that never fell. In Poland, Anna watched airplanes in the distance and tried to believe they would not come there. "They won't attack children," she whispered to her mother. But even the wind hesitated before passing through the window. With each passing day, the earth seemed heavier. Prayers became whispers, and the drums sounded louder. The seeds of iron had been sown, not in the soil, but in the hearts. And I knew, when man plants hatred, what grows is always destruction. Time continued its course, calm and cruel. The skies were still blue, but carried the color of omen. And then, on a cold dawn, I heard the first roar of engines crossing the border. The ground of the earth trembled, and the heart of the world stopped for a second. The storm had begun. The dawn brought with it a strange silence, heavy with expectation and fear. I watched the fields tremble under the weight of engines cutting through the air. The trees bent as if trying to flee from what was approaching, and the wind carried a metallic scent, foreshadowing the sound of destruction. Heinrich felt his heart race as the tanks appeared on the horizon. He knew he could not retreat. His duty called him. But inside him, an older voice, perhaps mine, perhaps his own, whispered, "Are you ready for this?" The houses still slept, and I saw people waking, confused, searching for answers that did not exist. Some prayed, others simply held each other, trying to stave off the feeling that something essential was about to die. Heinrich advanced, each step heavy, knowing that every movement could cost lives. He thought of his mother, the fields, the smell of wet earth, and the fresh bread of morning. He wanted to believe he was protecting something, but deep down he knew he had already lost part of his own innocence. In the Polish village, Anna woke to the distant sound of explosions and gunfire. The children cried before they even understood what was happening. She held them, whispering words that sounded more like promises than certainties. Marek, her brother, took the violin and began to play to calm the little ones. The notes trembled in the cold air, trying to compete with the roar of engines and the thunder of weapons. I saw them shiver, but also resist, each small gesture filled with courage. The first attack was not only physical, it tore apart normalcy, pulled eyes from the sky, and spread doubt and fear through hearts. I saw soldiers on both sides hesitating. Some raised weapons with conviction, others closed their eyes for a moment, remembering what I had placed within them, humanity. With each step of the tanks, each explosion, each scream, the world fractured a little more. I noticed, as I always do, the small acts of love that endured. Soldiers sharing water, mothers calming children, brothers holding each other's hands. Heinrich paused for a moment, staring at the devastated horizon. Something inside him cried out, "Is all of this necessary?" Anna held Marek's hand and felt her heart tighten. She knew the war had arrived, but tried to keep hope alive. And I, who watched them from above, felt the first true crack in the soul of humanity. It was not only the war that had begun, it was the sound of silence breaking, replaced by the cry of all those who still did not understand what they had chosen. The dawn ended, and the sun rose over a world that was no longer the same. The seeds of iron sown days ago began to sprout in smoke, ruins, and tears. It was the first cry, the cry that announced that nothing would ever be the same again. The sun rose with difficulty, cutting through a dense haze of smoke and dust. The horizon seemed farther away, shrouded by ashes dancing in the air, reminding everyone that the world had changed. Heinrich advanced through the destroyed streets, each step heavy, sensing the smell of burnt iron and wet earth mingled together. He helped a wounded soldier, an enemy he did not know, and for a moment I felt the weight of humanity in his hands. A simple, silent act, unseen by anyone else, yet carrying a truth greater than any flag. The Polish children still cried in Anna's shelter. She handed out makeshift blankets, and Marek held the hand of one of them, playing the violin with trembling notes, trying to cover the sound of distant explosions. Fear was palpable, but I saw a silent resistance that could not be erased. On both sides, men and women moved among the ruins, seeking water, food, anything that still reminded them of the normalcy they had lost. The world seemed smaller, compressed by destruction, yet every human gesture was a spark of hope. Heinrich stopped in front of a partially destroyed house. A child hid among the rubble, looking at him with eyes that had already seen too much. He leaned down, spoke words that would never be remembered, and the child shyly smiled. A brief moment, but I saw every spark of compassion, and my heart warmed because of it. Anna watched from her shelter the same scene, wondering if Heinrich existed, if any soldier could find kindness amidst the war. She did not know that from above I saw both of them, separated by borders, yet connected by the same invisible thread of humanity. A fine rain began to fall over the village, mixing with dust and smoke. The drops hit the broken windows, partially washing away the sorrow, and I felt that even the earth was trying to recover, slowly. Around them, people found courage in small gestures, sharing water, protecting someone from fire, smiling when all seemed lost. These acts were silent, almost invisible, but to me they were immense. Heinrich continued on his way, helping wherever he could, feeling in every gaze the same confusion I saw in himself. Anna took a deep breath, teaching the children that courage was not the absence of fear, but persistence in the face of it. And I, watching from above, saw the contradiction that defines man, capable of destruction, yet still capable of tenderness. The world was covered in ashes, but among them dewdrops still shone, small, fragile, insistent. And so, on that day, the war showed its force, but also my silent hope. Even when the world seemed lost, hearts still held small gestures that no one else would see. The day began quietly, yet heavy with echoes of what had happened. The streets still smoldered, and the wind carried fragments of voices, cries, and broken wood. I watched everything from above, feeling every heartbeat of fear and courage, every human gesture struggling to survive. Heinrich found a moment of quiet among the rubble. He sat on a stone and took out the notebook he had carried since the beginning of the war. He wrote letters to his mother, words carefully chosen, trying not to reveal the panic he felt inside. He spoke of bravery, of duty, of hope, but the truth, known only to me, was that he was afraid. Each line was an effort to convince himself that all of it made sense. In Poland, Anna also wrote, but her words were silent, addressed to me. "If you are there, Lord," she wrote, "take care of the children. I only want peace." She did not know if anyone would read them, but she needed to place her prayers somewhere. It was the only way to keep her heart steady amidst the chaos. Marek, her brother, took her letters and looked up at the sky, as if hoping I could carry her words directly to Heinrich. The distance between the two worlds was immense, but I saw the invisible bonds that connected them, bonds of fear, hope, and shared humanity. Heinrich sent his letters with the certainty that many would never arrive. They were lost in the confusion of destroyed roads, in the fires consuming villages, in the silence of death. Still, he wrote, because writing was more than sending words. It was a way to survive his own war. Anna, between an improvised class and protecting the children, wrote each thought, each prayer, as if every letter were a bridge to a world that could still exist. She felt the weight of those who had gone, and I perceived the quiet strength in her determination. The sun passed through smoke-filled clouds, and the earth still exhaled the smell of destruction. But I also saw human persistence, the silent care hiding among the ruins, small acts that no one else would notice. Heinrich wrote another letter that afternoon, knowing it could be the last. He closed the notebook and took a deep breath, watching the sky. And I, who saw his doubt and courage intertwined. Anna sent her imaginary letters to the winds, as if launching messages straight to the sky. Each word was a hope that endured, even when the world seemed to collapse. And I, who saw everything, read every letter, every prayer, every human effort. Letters never delivered, messages that would never arrive, yet they did not lose their value. For as long as they were written, I knew the hearts were still alive. The sound of war became almost constant. Each explosion, each cry, each gunshot cut through the sky like invisible blades. The silence, the one I loved so much, had completely vanished. Heinrich advanced, the weight of duty on his shoulders. Each step brought him closer to scenes he could never forget. Ruined houses, fleeing people, wounded men lying on the ground. He shouted orders, but his voice was lost among the thunder of weapons. Inside him, a silent conflict grew, the certainty of duty against the memory of his own humanity. In Poland, Anna ran through the streets with children clutched in her arms. Fear dominated the little ones, and every movement had to be measured to prevent anyone from getting hurt. Marek played the violin amid distant silent explosions, trying to build a bridge between pain and hope. I watched every gesture, every step, every tear, every word whispered in the midst of chaos. The sky seemed deaf, not because I could not hear, but because the sound of destruction drowned out everything. Heinrich found a fallen enemy soldier. For a moment he hesitated, remembering that they were both children of the same world. But war demanded quick decisions, and he moved forward, leaving the gesture of compassion unfinished. Anna searched for shelter for an entire family. Her hands were injured, her heart racing, yet she remained steadfast, knowing that courage is sometimes silent. The heavens reflected the confusion on earth. Heavy, dark clouds mixed with smoke from burned cities. The wind carried the smell of gunpowder and blood, and I felt every pain, every fear, every loss, as if it were my own heart. The prayers that once filled the air were now almost inaudible, but I noticed their persistence in small gestures: an outstretched hand, a hidden tear, a song played to soothe. Heinrich looked toward the horizon and saw the sun reflecting on the ruins of a village. Something within him broke, but something also remained firm: the certainty that even in darkness humanity still existed. Anna, exhausted and trembling, held a child who wouldn't stop crying. She whispered words that had no immediate effect, but I heard them clearly. They were words of hope, resilience, and love. I observed the wounded earth and thought, man can cover the world with ruins, but he cannot extinguish the spark I placed in every heart. The sky had gone deaf, but I still listened. It was in that moment, amid explosions and tears, that humanity revealed its contradiction, capable of destroying, but also of creating invisible bridges between hearts. And so, even when the world seemed blind to my call, I continued to see every gesture, every tear, every attempt at love. The afternoon fell with a pale, almost unreal hue. The streets were covered in ashes, and the scent of war lingered, mingled with the fragile aroma of wet earth after the rain. Heinrich leaned against a crumbling wall, feeling every aching muscle, every weary bone. The sound of weapons still echoed, but there were brief moments of silence when the world seemed to hold its breath. He looked at a Polish child lying near the rubble. His heart tightened, and for a moment he thought about all that could have been different. The child looked back at him, wide eyes, full of fear, but without hatred. Heinrich reached out, offering water and a small gesture of humanity that no one else would notice. It was in that instant that he understood. Even in chaos, goodness could still exist. Meanwhile, Anna walked among the ruins, holding two children by the hand. Marek tried to play his violin in the pauses between the noise, creating trembling notes that seemed to defy the war itself. She felt every fragile breath of life around her and clung to it like an anchor. I watched them both from above, so distant and yet so close, connected by the same spark I had placed in every human heart. Darkness could be deep, but there was still light, and it came from silent actions, from simple care, from persistent love. Heinrich found other survivors and helped guide them to safety. Exhaustion weighed on his shoulders, yet he pressed on. Each life saved was a small but real victory. At the end of the day, Anna finally found a moment of rest. She sat with the children, holding them close, allowing herself to breathe, even if only for a moment. The sun began to set, casting a faint glow among the ruins, and I saw, clearly, what men so often forget. Hope can rise even in the darkest moments. The final light illuminated tired faces, revealing wounds, tears, but also courage. Amid destruction, small sparks of kindness endured. Heinrich and Anna, unaware of each other's existence, shared the same space of humanity that I saw from above. War had taught pain, but it also reminded that love and compassion could never be erased. And in that final light of day, I smiled silently, knowing that despite the thunder, the fear and the suffering, there was still a chance for mankind to find its way back to itself. Night would fall, and the world would remain wounded. But in every gesture, every outstretched hand, every silent prayer, the flame of hope would not go out. It was the moment when the most most fragile hearts shone, and I saw them, small, weary, yet stubbornly alive. Morning began with a silence that was not of peace, but of anticipation. I watched the world breathe heavily, as if it knew something final was about to happen. Heinrich walked through the ruins, each step heavier than the last. The village that still held traces of life yesterday was now almost unrecognizable. He felt every fragment of earth, every broken stone, as if he carried on his shoulders the weight of all that had been lost. Fear did not paralyze him. It made him reflect on every choice made. He thought about letters never sent, gestures he could not make, and lives that had passed before his eyes. In Poland, Anna looked at the children still by her side. The improvised shelter was cold and damp, but she kept them close, trying to protect what little innocence remained. Marek played the violin for the last time that day, each note carrying the memory of all that had been lost, but also the hope that refused to die. I watched them both from above, and the sadness I felt was profound. Yet within it, something filled me with trust, the persistence of human love, even when everything seemed to fall apart. The streets were silent, not with rest, but with the echo of destruction. The voices of children, the cries of men and women, the screams of pain and courage, all blended into a sorrowful yet truthful melody. Heinrich helped a wounded man, offering his hand and comfort, even knowing that war would not forgive. Anna held a child in her arms and whispered words that could never erase what had happened, yet carried warmth and safety. The silence I once loved finally disappeared. But it did not fade only because of war. It died burdened with pain, and in its place a new space was born, the space of human awareness, of mourning, of resistance. I looked upon them both, and upon all who survived, and realized that despite the devastation, there was something that could never be taken away, the capacity to care, to love, and to rise even when all seemed lost. Heinrich and Anna never knew of each other's existence, yet their paths were guided by the same spark I placed within every human heart. Each act of kindness, each silent tear, each unheard prayer still carried meaning, and I, who watched from above, understood that the silence of war could never erase the inner silence of hope. The day ended with a sky painted in cold, grey tones, but even among ruins and ashes, I saw light endure within human hearts. Yes, silence had died, but love, courage, and compassion remained alive, waiting for the children of my world to remember them, even in their darkest days.